The day I walked into my own funeral, my son was the one standing over the coffin, and his wife was the one who planned it. But what they didn't know was that I was still very much alive and watching every move they made. Hi, my name is Margaret Hayes, and this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when a mother's love is mistaken for weakness and how far someone will go to erase a woman who refuses to disappear. Before I tell you what really happened here in Atlanta, take a second to drop in the comments where you're watching from. And make sure you subscribe, because after what I'm about to share, you'll understand why I never trust smiles at church anymore. It began on a quiet Thursday morning. The sky hung low, gray and restless, and the rain hadn't stopped since dawn. I was folding laundry in my small apartment on the east side when I heard a soft scrape at my door. No knock, no footsteps, just the sound of paper brushing against tile. A single black envelope lay on the floor. No name, no stamp. Something about it made my heart tighten. I opened it carefully, and a single photo slipped out, glossy, still damp from rain. My son, Malcolm, in a black suit, standing beside a casket draped in white lilies. I didn't breathe until I saw what was engraved on the coffin. Margaret L. Hayes, my name. For a moment, everything in the room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the tap of rain, gone. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat and the memory of my son's voice calling me Mama like he used to when he was small. Then the phone rang. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Vanessa Reed Hayes, my daughter-in-law. Her tone was polite, too polite. "Margaret," she said softly, "you might want to come to New Hope Baptist Church. There's something you should see." The church sat on the corner of Auburn Avenue, where the old oaks leaned like tired witnesses. I knew the place well. It was where Malcolm had been baptized, where his father's funeral was held, where we'd once been a family that prayed together. Now I was walking back into it, dressed in my Sunday coat, heart pounding. The first thing I noticed was the crowd. Familiar faces from the neighborhood. Crying, hugging, whispering. The smell of lilies filled the air. The choir hummed, "His eye is on the sparrow." And there, right at the front, stood the casket. My casket. The program on top read, "Celebration of Life, Margaret Louise Hayes, 1958 to 2025. I froze, staring at the picture of myself framed in gold. Someone in the back gasped. My knees almost gave out, and then I saw him, Malcolm, my only son, sitting in the front pew, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He looked like a man who'd lost everything. Vanessa sat beside him, a lace handkerchief pressed dramatically to her cheek, her hand resting on his leg, as if to remind everyone she owned his grief too. When Malcolm finally looked up, his face drained of color. His lips parted, but no sound came out. For a second, it was like time stopped between us. 35 years of love and sacrifice balanced on a blade. I took a step forward. The room went quiet. "Don't stop on my account," I said softly. "I came to see how good I look." A few people gasped. Vanessa's hand dropped from Malcolm's knee. "Margaret," she whispered, her voice thin as air. I walked down the aisle, each step echoing off the polished floor. The choir stopped singing. The pastor froze with his Bible half open. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A man in a gray suit quietly slipping toward the side exit, holding a brown folder tight to his chest. I knew that face. Attorney James Simmons, my late husband's lawyer. The one who told me years ago that certain documents had gone missing after the accident. Why would he be here? Vanessa turned toward me, her expression twisting from fear to something else, something sharp. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed under her breath. "You were supposed to—" She stopped herself. Supposed to what? I asked. Her lips curled into a small smile. Rest. A chill spread through me, but I didn't let her see it. I turned to Malcolm, my voice low but firm. Son, did you know about this? He shook his head slowly, eyes glistening. Mama, I didn't. But he couldn't finish. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any lie could have. I turned away from them both, the rain roaring against the stained glass. That's when I saw it. Something dark tucked beneath the casket skirt. I leaned down under the pretense of steadying myself, and when I rose, the weight of another black envelope was in my hand. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I walked straight out those church doors and into the storm. In the car, I finally tore the envelope open. Inside was one line typed neatly on plain paper. The beneficiary knows the truth. No signature. No explanation. Just that. Through the windshield, I caught sight of Attorney Simmons climbing into a black sedan across the street. Rain streaked down the windows, but I could still see the envelope on the passenger seat, this one with Malcolm's name written across it in red ink. My breath caught. The car rolled away. I sat there for a long time, the storm drumming against the roof, wondering what kind of mother raises a son who could sit through her funeral, and wondering what kind of wife could smile while she buried her alive in lies. Sometimes, I wish I'd turned the key, gone home, and let the rain wash that day away. But something in me, the part that had fought too hard, loved too deeply, refused to stay quiet. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Dead or alive, a mother always finds out the truth. And what I discovered next changed everything. I followed the car from a distance, headlights dimmed, the wipers keeping rhythm with my pulse. Atlanta's streets were slick with rain, reflecting the city lights like a pool of secrets. Every red light felt like a test of nerve. Every turn, a question I wasn't ready to answer. Attorney Simmons had been my husband's lawyer for nearly 20 years. He'd been the one who comforted me when Henry died, told me things were being handled, that I didn't need to worry about the factory settlement or the house deed. I trusted him. Back then, I trusted everyone. He turned onto Peachtree Street, pulled into the underground lot of a mid-rise building, and disappeared inside. I parked across the road and waited, the heater blowing fog onto the windshield. My hands trembled slightly as I reached into my purse and pulled out the black envelope again. The beneficiary knows the truth. The words burned through me like a warning and a dare. Beneficiary of what? And why was Vanessa's handwriting on the one under the coffin? After 15 minutes, Simmons reemerged, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was Vanessa. She was dressed in a tan trench coat, her hair wrapped neatly, heels clicking against the wet pavement like punctuation marks to a story she thought she'd finished. I lowered my head, barely breathing. They stopped at his car. She handed him a small black pouch, and in exchange, he gave her a thick manila folder, the same one he'd carried from the church. When she opened it, a faint smile touched her lips. Then she leaned in and said something I couldn't hear, but Simmons's expression tightened. He nodded once, looked around nervously, and drove off alone. Vanessa stood there for a moment, watching his car disappear, then got into her own vehicle and pulled away in the opposite direction. I didn't know what was inside that folder, but I knew it had something to do with me. I started the engine and followed her. Vanessa's car led me north, past the glittering skyline and into the quiet of Brookhaven, where the houses grew larger and the streetlights fewer. She pulled into a long driveway lined with tall hedges and parked beside a house I didn't recognize. Modern, glass everywhere, too big for a couple drowning in financial trouble. I parked a few houses down, engine off, watching from the shadows. Inside, the lights flickered on. A man opened the door. Tall, clean cut, wearing a suit like he'd just come from court. He kissed her. Not the kind of kiss you give your mother-in-law's blessing over. I felt a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with jealousy. It was disgust. My son was at home planning my funeral, while his wife was out here planning her next move. When the man stepped back into the light, my heart skipped. I knew him. Darrell Owens, a mortgage consultant, the same one who'd handled the paperwork when Malcolm refinanced my house last year. It all connected. She wasn't just cheating on my son. She was cleaning him out. I sat there until their silhouettes disappeared deeper into the house. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments, the lost documents, the foreclosure papers, the fake death certificate, the envelopes. Then my phone buzzed, a new message, no contact name. It read, "Stop digging, Margaret. You don't know who you're dealing with." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Someone was watching me. I started the car, trying to breathe, trying to think. But when I checked my mirrors, I caught it, a pair of headlights behind me. Close, too close. I turned right, then left, down a narrow street near the old Brookhaven train depot. The car followed. I drove faster, cutting through puddles, my tires hissing against the asphalt. When I turned again, I killed the lights and rolled into an alley behind an old grocery store. The other car slowed, passed by, and disappeared into the... For a long moment, I sat in silence. The only sound was my breath and the faint tick of the cooling engine. Then, I saw something on the passenger seat, a slip of paper that hadn't been there before. Someone must have slid it through my cracked window while I was watching Vanessa. The note said, "He signed it over before he died." "Look at the will," I whispered the words out loud, tasting the betrayal in them. Henry, my husband, the man who always said he'd leave everything to me and Malcolm. Look at the will. That was the key. I spent the rest of the night at a 24-hour diner off Ponce de Leon Avenue, sitting in the corner booth with a mug of lukewarm coffee. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The neon lights from the sign outside flickered over the window, painting the world in red and blue. Somewhere out there, Vanessa and Simmons were playing a game with my family's name, and I'd been left off the board, or worse, crossed out entirely. I pulled a napkin closer and started scribbling. Find old will. Check Henry's signature. Talk to bank. Who is the beneficiary? For the first time that day, I felt something stronger than fear. Determination. They might have buried my name, but I was still breathing. And if Vanessa thought she could rewrite my story, she'd better learn. Mothers like me don't vanish quietly. I looked at my reflection in the diner window. Tired eyes, streaked mascara, but fire still burning beneath. If you've ever been underestimated, you know that look. The one that says, "I'm not done yet." Outside, thunder rolled again. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just about property or money. It was something bigger. Because the moment I decided to fight back, someone else started watching me too. By sunrise, the rain had stopped, but the city still felt heavy, as if Atlanta itself knew a secret it couldn't keep. The note from the diner sat on my dashboard. Its words burned into my mind. He signed it over before he died. Look at the will. Henry's will. I hadn't thought about that paper in years. Not since the day the factory called to say there'd been an accident. He'd worked 32 years at Fulton Steel and Supply, same plant his father worked before him. When they told me a machine malfunctioned, crushed the scaffolding and that he didn't make it. I believed them. I was too busy trying to hold Malcolm together to ask questions. Now, all these years later, those words rang hollow. I parked outside the factory gates just as the workers' shift siren echoed through the morning air. The place looked smaller than I remembered, older. Rust climbed the fences, and the smell of metal and oil lingered like ghosts that never left. Inside the main office, a young receptionist looked up, her badge reading Tanya Richardson. She smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm looking for someone who might remember my husband, Henry Hayes. He worked here until 1998. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "That's a while back, but Mr. Jenkins might. He's been here since forever." She pointed toward a glass door labeled Operations Manager. Mr. Jenkins was a tall man with a stooped back and kind eyes that didn't quite hide his worry. He remembered me instantly. "Lord, Miss Margaret, Henry Hayes? I never thought I'd see his wife walk through here again." "Neither did I said softly. "I just need to ask a few questions about the accident." He sighed and motioned for me to sit. His office smelled of coffee and metal filings. "That accident wasn't right," he said after a pause, "but we were told to keep quiet. Company lawyers came through the next morning. Your husband had been fighting for new safety contracts. They said the equipment wasn't faulty, but I saw the damage myself." "Company lawyers?" I leaned forward. He nodded. "A man named Simmons handled it. Smooth talker. Said the company would take care of your family. That's the last I heard." The room tilted for a second. Attorney James Simmons. He wasn't just our family lawyer. He'd been theirs first. "Do you remember any paperwork he left behind? Anything with Henry's name on it?" Jenkins frowned, then rummaged through a drawer. After a minute, he pulled out an old binder, edges frayed. "This here's all I've got. Old claim forms and correspondence. But I remember one thing clear. Henry refused to sign his final settlement. Said the numbers didn't add up. He didn't sign?" "No, ma'am." "But the company closed the..." My hands trembled so badly I had to set the paper down. Vanessa forged Henry's signature. She'd been in this long before she even met my son. I drove straight to the Fulton County Records Office, binder in hand. The clerk, an older woman named Miss Darlene, peered over her glasses. "You're in luck. Probate archives are open today. Give me the name, and I'll pull the file." Minutes later, she returned carrying a thin manila envelope sealed with county tape. "Henry L. Hayes, died February 12, 1998. Last will and testament filed March 3rd. My throat tightened as I broke the seal. The paper inside was brittle, yellowed at the edges. I scanned the first page and stopped cold. The will left everything: the house, the insurance, the settlement, to Malcolm Hayes, under guardianship of family trustee Vanessa Reed. I read the line 3 times. My husband couldn't have written this. Vanessa would have been a teenager back then. The date at the bottom, March 3rd, 1998, was the same week Simmons told me everything was settled. That's when it hit me. Vanessa didn't just marry into my family. She'd been connected to Simmons and my husband's case long before she even met Malcolm. I stepped out of the records office, the city spinning around me. My breath came shallow, my heart thundering. Somewhere between grief and fury, I realized how deep this went. I pulled out my phone, ready to call Malcolm, ready to demand answers. But then I saw the text. "Unknown number. You're getting close. Be careful what you dig up next." I froze on the sidewalk. People bustled around me. A mother with her child, a man selling water bottles by the corner. But it all blurred into noise. Someone was tracking me. I looked around and caught a reflection in the glass window beside me. A dark SUV idling across the street. Windows tinted. No plates I could see. I turned to head the other way, and my phone rang. Malcolm's name lit up the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Malcolm? Mama?" His voice cracked. "I don't know what's going on, but I think someone's been in the house. Vanessa's acting strange. She told me not to call you. Where are you?" "At home." "But, Mama..." His voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a letter on the kitchen table. It's addressed to you." The line went dead. I didn't even realize I'd started running until the wind stung my face. I threw the car into gear and pulled onto the freeway, every traffic light blending into the next. A forged will. A lawyer from the past. A daughter-in-law tied to my husband's death. Whatever was waiting in that house, it was the next piece of a puzzle someone had spent decades hiding. And I was about to walk straight into it. By the time I reached the house, the sky had dimmed again. That eerie Atlanta twilight, where the air turned still before another storm. My old porch light flickered like a warning. I hadn't been back here in months. The curtains were closed, the roses in the front yard wilted and dry. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a memory someone tried to erase. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, gathering my breath. Malcolm's voice echoed in my head. "There's a letter on the kitchen table. It's addressed to you." Something in his tone told me he was afraid, and if my son was scared in his own house, then things were worse than I thought. I slipped out of the car and crossed the lawn quietly. The front door was slightly ajar. Inside, the house smelled faintly of bleach and air freshener, too clean for a home that had been full of life once. The family photos were gone from the wall. The ones of Henry holding Malcolm as a baby, the ones from church picnics, all of them. The only picture left was my wedding photo, still hanging crooked in the hallway, like it refused to come down. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a flickering bulb, and there it was, an envelope on the table, cream-colored, my name written in neat cursive. To Margaret. I hesitated before opening it, the paper trembling in my hand. Inside were 2 sheets, one typed, one handwritten. The typed page was brief, cold, and formal. Mrs. Hayes. If you're reading this, then you already know Henry's death wasn't an accident. He found out what we were doing. He planned to expose us. He never got the chance. A friend. I stared at the words, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I turned to the handwritten note. The ink, the piano bench, the safe. I ran to the living room, heart hammering. The old upright piano sat in the corner, dust coating its lid. I lifted the seat. At first, nothing, just yellowed sheet music and a few loose keys. Then, underneath, my fingers brushed against something small and metallic. A key. I turned it over in my hand. The tag read, "Garage." For a second, I just stared at it, confused, until I remembered. Years ago, Henry had built a hidden storage space in the garage wall, claiming he needed somewhere private for his tools. I never questioned it. Now I knew better. The floorboards creaked behind me. "Malcolm?" I called out, my voice breaking. No answer, just the hum of the fridge and the rain starting to tap against the windows again. I walked toward the garage door slowly, each step echoing like a warning. When I pushed the door open, the light inside was already on. Someone had been here. Recently. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and something older. Paper, maybe. I moved to the far corner, where Henry's old workbench still stood. The wall looked ordinary, but when I ran my hand along the back panel, I felt a faint gap near the bottom. I slid the key in. The lock clicked. Inside the compartment were files, a few photographs, and a small cassette tape wrapped in plastic. Across the label, in Henry's handwriting, were the words, "For Maggie." In case I don't make it. My breath caught. I pulled out an old tape recorder from the shelf, blew the dust away, and pressed play. Henry's voice filled the room. "Margaret, if you're hearing this, I didn't die in an accident. I was close to uncovering a scheme inside the company. Money laundering, fake safety reports, stolen payouts. Simmons and someone else have been taking kickbacks for years. They needed me gone before I went public. And I think..." The tape crackled, faded, then came back. "I think Vanessa Reed is connected to them. I saw her name on the early trust forms. Be careful. Don't let them find Malcolm before you do." The recording ended with a click. I stood there, the silence pressing against my chest, tears stinging my eyes. Henry hadn't just been killed. He'd been silenced, and the same people who took him were now circling me. My phone buzzed on the counter. A new message from Malcolm. "Mama, don't come back to the house. She knows you found the letter." My fingers went cold. I turned toward the front window and saw movement outside. Headlights turning slowly onto the street, stopping right in front of the house. The same black SUV from the records office. I killed the lights, dropped to the floor, and watched through the curtains. The car idled for a moment, then the driver's door opened. A silhouette stepped out. Tall, slim, holding an umbrella. Even through the rain, I knew that stance. Vanessa. She walked up the path, heels crunching on wet gravel, her coat gleaming under the streetlight. She stopped right at the porch and looked up at the window, straight at me, like she already knew I was watching. Then she smiled, that cold, calculated smile that told me this was no longer about money. It was personal. And as I watched her walk to the door, calm and confident as ever, I realized something that sent chills through my bones. Henry had left one key in the piano bench, but he said there were two. If you're still here with me, take a deep breath, because it's about to get even darker. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and make sure you've subscribed. You won't believe what I found when I discovered where that second key was hidden. I waited until Vanessa's car finally pulled away before I exhaled. The rain swallowed the sound of her tires as she turned the corner. My hands were still trembling, clutching that one small key Henry left behind, the one labeled garage. He said there were two, but if the first one opened the safe in the wall, where was the second? I sat on the floor for a long time, the tape recorder still in my lap. Henry's voice replayed in my head. "Don't let them find Malcolm before you do." Every time I heard it, the words cut deeper. I looked around the house. It felt different now, hollow and strange. Every corner held echoes of laughter that had turned into lies. I needed to get out before Vanessa came back. I grabbed the tape, the letter, and the key. The church. Henry played piano for the choir at New Hope Baptist for almost 20 years. That piano had been his escape. The one place he said no one would ever look for sin in sound. I turned the car around and headed straight there. When I arrived, the parking lot was empty, except for the pastor's old Buick. The church lights were dim, a faint glow leaking from the side windows. My heels echoed through the corridor as I stepped inside, each sound swallowed by the old wood and the faint smell of wax and rain. The sanctuary was dark, the only light coming from the candles near the altar. The piano stood beside the pulpit, same one from my funeral. Black, polished, gleaming faintly in the shadows. I ran my hand across its lid, feeling the cool smoothness. My reflection looked back at me, older, wearier, but stronger. "All right, Henry," I whispered. "Where'd you hide it?" I opened the lid, pressed a few keys. They sounded slightly off, like one was heavier than the others. I leaned closer, tapped the F key again. It stuck. Carefully, I lifted it, and beneath the string plate, something small shimmered in the candlelight. A key. This one silver, older, unmarked. I pulled it free, heart pounding. The sanctuary door creaked. I froze. A figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, familiar, shoulders hunched. For a second, I thought it was Malcolm. "Who's there?" I called softly. He stepped into the light. Deacon Harris. "Lord, Margaret, what are you doing here this late?" Relief washed over me, then suspicion followed close behind. "I could ask you the same thing, Deacon." "Church is closed." He rubbed the back of his neck. I left something in the office. Didn't think anyone would be here." His eyes darted to my hands. "What's that you got there?" I slipped the key into my pocket. "Nothing that concerns you." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You always did have a way of finding what folks tried to hide." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I took a small step back. "You knew, didn't you?" "About Henry. About what Simmons did." Harris sighed. "Margaret, I told Henry to leave it alone. Some things are bigger than us. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" My voice shook. "By helping them?" His jaw clenched. "You don't understand. Vanessa, she's not who you think she is." "Then who is she?" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the front door as if he expected someone else to walk in. "She's connected to them, the people behind the settlement scam. Simmons was her uncle. She grew up around that money. Henry found out too late. The room seemed to spin." "And you helped cover it up?" "I didn't have a choice," he said quietly. "They threatened my family. They said they'd burn the church down if I didn't keep quiet." I stared at him, every word slicing through what little trust I had left. "You let me bury my husband's memory under lies." He looked down, shame darkening his face. "I'm sorry. But if you keep digging, Margaret, they won't stop this time." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed. Fear. Pure, real fear. He whispered, "They know you're here." I didn't wait to ask who they were. I grabbed my purse and rushed out the side door. The silver key tightened my palm. The cold air hit me like a slap. Rain now pouring again. I made it to my car just as headlights flared at the end of the lot. A black SUV, the same one from before. It stopped under the lamplight, and a figure stepped out. Umbrella raised, face hidden. Deacon Harris called out behind me. "Margaret, go! Don't let them—" A sharp crack echoed. Thunder, maybe. But it silenced his words. I turned just long enough to see him stumble, clutching his shoulder. I screamed his name, but he waved me off weakly, pointing toward the road. "Go." So I did. I sped out of the lot, rain streaking the windshield. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the car straight. Somewhere between fear and fury, I heard myself whisper, "If Henry died protecting this secret, I'll live to expose it." The silver key gleamed under the dashboard light. I didn't know what it opened yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was behind that lock was the truth they'd killed to keep buried. If you've been following my story this far, then you already feel it. That fire in your chest when someone tries to silence you. I parked near an old diner off Cascade Road, the kind Henry used to take me to after Sunday service. I ordered black coffee and sat in the corner booth, staring at the key on the table. It glinted under the fluorescent lights like a secret begging to be spoken. Every clue pointed back to one thing: Henry's past, Vanessa's lies, and Simmons's betrayal. But the way Deacon Harris looked at me last night before he fell, that wasn't just guilt. That was fear. And his last words echoed in my head. "Don't let them." He never finished. I needed answers. Fast. I took out Henry's letter again. My eyes caught something I hadn't noticed before. The ink near the bottom had faded unevenly, like it had been smeared by water. But under the right light, faint words appeared. Small. Almost invisible. "If I'm gone, the truth stays in the one place that can't lie." The one place that can't lie. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then it hit me. Henry always said that phrase when he talked about numbers. He'd handled payroll for the factory, and he trusted math more than men. If he hid something in the place that can't lie, maybe it wasn't a place at all. Maybe it was data. I pulled out my phone and searched Fulton Steel employee archives. The site was still live, though the company had long since merged under another name. I clicked Former Employee Access and entered Henry's old ID number, 44517. It still worked. The page loaded with his last payroll statement. At first glance, it looked normal. But at the bottom of the page, a small note appeared. "Safe deposit number 202, Citizens Bank, Decatur Branch." My pulse quickened. A safe deposit box. The silver key. The bank sat on a quiet corner of Church Street, all glass and polished marble. I walked in, trying to look calm, though my heart pounded like a drum. "Good morning," the clerk said cheerfully. "How can I help you?" "I need to access my late husband's safe deposit box," I said. "Box 202. My name's Margaret Hayes." She typed for a moment, frowned, then looked up. "That box is listed as joint ownership. You'll need the other party present to open it." I felt my stomach drop. "Other party?" "Yes, ma'am. Listed here as..." She squinted at the screen. "Malcolm Reed Hayes. My son." The clerk smiled politely. "Would you like me to call him for verification?" "No," I said quickly. "No, I'll take care of it myself." I turned and walked straight out. Outside, I leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady myself. The world seemed to tilt slightly, like reality had shifted under my feet. Malcolm, my only son. He had access to Henry's safe. He'd been tied to the will, and yet he'd acted like he didn't know a thing. I refused to believe he was part of it, but the facts didn't lie. I dialed his number again, straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice shaking. "Malcolm, I don't know what's going on, but I need you to meet me at the house tonight. It's time you told me the truth." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the bank window. My own eyes looked foreign, tired, wary, but harder now, stronger. If I couldn't reach him, I'd find someone who could. That evening, I drove to Vanessa and Malcolm's neighborhood. Their house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, porch light flickering in the dusk. I parked under a tree and waited. Around 9, a car pulled up. Malcolm's silver sedan. He stepped out alone, looking exhausted, shoulders slumped. He still wore the same suit from my funeral. When he went inside, I followed quietly, slipping through the side gate toward the kitchen window. Light spilled from inside. I crouched behind the hedges. Vanessa wasn't home. The house was eerily silent. Through the window, I saw Malcolm standing at the table, holding the same manila folder I'd seen Vanessa give Simmons in the parking lot. His face was pale. He flipped it open scanned a few pages, then sank into a chair. He was crying. I couldn't stay outside any longer. I tapped lightly on the window. His head snapped up, eyes wide. When he saw me, he froze. Then he ran to the door and pulled it open. "Mama?" I stepped inside slowly. "You got my message." He nodded, voice shaking. "I don't even know where to start." "Then start with the truth," I said. "All of it." He ran a hand over his face. "Vanessa told me the money from Dad's settlement had been frozen. She said Simmons was handling everything, that it was complicated legal stuff I wouldn't understand. She made me sign papers, Mama. I didn't know I was giving her control over everything. When I found out, I tried to get out of it, but she said she'd ruin me." "She already has," I whispered. "She's been lying." He swallowed hard. "That folder, it's Dad's original settlement claim. His signature, his notes, everything. It proves he didn't die in an accident. And the bank records," he hesitated. "What about them?" "They show deposits made into Simmons' account and into mine." I stared at him. "Into yours?" He nodded miserably. "I thought it was inheritance, Mama. She told me Dad wanted to leave me something. I didn't know it was hush money." My hand covered my mouth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal tag. "Vanessa left this in the drawer. It says Box 202. I think she's been watching the account too." The silver key in my pocket grew heavier. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "We'll fix this." Together, he nodded weakly, but there was something in his eyes, guilt, and something darker. Outside, a car door slammed. Malcolm's face drained of color. "She's home." We both turned toward the window just as the porch light flickered. Once, twice, then went out. And in that brief silence before the front door creaked open, I realized the truth. Vanessa had never been the only one keeping secrets. If you've ever trusted someone who turned your world upside down, you know that kind of silence. The one before everything shatters. Drop a comment if you've ever felt that moment when truth hits harder than betrayal. And stay close, because what Vanessa says next changes everything. The door opened slowly. Vanessa stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a metronome for fear. She wore a black trench coat, her hair sleek and dry, not a drop of rain on her. That meant she hadn't just arrived. She'd been waiting. Her eyes moved across the room and landed on Malcolm first. Then on me. "Well," she said, closing the door behind her. "Isn't this touching?" Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind that chills your spine because you know it means danger. Malcolm's hand trembled as he held the folder. "Vanessa, it's over. I know everything now." She laughed softly, that cold, careful laugh of hers that never reached her eyes. "Do you, baby? Because from where I'm standing, you still look confused." I stepped forward. "You lied to him. You forged Henry's signature. You stole everything we built." Her gaze flicked to me, sharp as glass. "Oh, Margaret, don't start preaching like you didn't know how this family worked. You think Henry was a saint? He was part of it, too." My heart jumped. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa tossed her purse onto the counter and started pacing. "He and Simmons ran those fake claims together. They paid off inspectors, falsified safety records, pocketed the difference. But when the factory started an internal audit, Henry got scared. He wanted to turn himself in." I shook my head, refusing to believe her. "Henry would never—" "Oh, he would," she cut in. "He just planned to drag Simmons down with him. But see, Simmons had friends, powerful ones. They couldn't let that happen. So they made sure your husband's little accident took care of the problem. I felt the room tilt, my breath catching in my chest. Henry. Part of it? Number. It couldn't be true. But Vanessa's voice was steady, sure. She believed every word. You're lying, Malcolm said hoarsely. Am I? She asked softly. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded document, tossing it onto the table. This is the original partnership agreement between your father and Simmons. Look at the signatures, both of them right there. Your daddy wasn't innocent, and neither are you. Malcolm's hands trembled as he picked it up. This can't be real. It is, she said. Henry wanted to come clean, but Simmons wouldn't let him. So when Henry tried to get out, they framed it as an accident. Simmons handled the will, the estate, and made sure the money flowed through your name. My stomach dropped. That's why everything was in Malcolm's account. Vanessa smiled faintly. Exactly. You were too clean, too trusting, easy to use. Malcolm's voice cracked. You let me think it was inheritance money. She shrugged. You wanted to believe me. And you did. Until now, for a long moment, no one spoke. The rain outside grew louder, hammering the windows. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes glistened, not with guilt, but with pride. There was something deeper there, though. Something almost human. Why? I asked quietly. You had everything. The house, the money, my son. Why do all this? She turned to me slowly, the mask slipping just enough for a flash of something raw to show. Because your husband ruined my mother. The words hit like thunder. What did you say? Vanessa's voice wavered, but only slightly. My mother, Clarice Reed. She was one of the plant workers your husband and Simmons fired after they found out about the payout fraud. She lost everything. Her job, her pension, her home. We lived out of her car for months. She died 2 years later. Henry Hayes took her dignity, and I swore one day I'd take his. The room went still. I couldn't breathe. All the hate, the lies, they weren't random. They were generational. Revenge passed down like blood. You married my son just to get back at me? I whispered. Vanessa smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. No, Margaret. I married your son to get to his father's money, but somewhere along the way, I started hating myself for loving him. Malcolm's face crumpled. You loved me? She looked at him, eyes full of something painful and real. More than I planned to. For a brief second, her mask slipped completely. The ruthless woman vanished, replaced by someone broken by her own choices. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She straightened, cold again. Simmons wanted all of you out of the way. The fake funeral was supposed to scare you into leaving town. But you're stubborn, Margaret. You kept digging. I felt the key in my pocket. The silver one. My fingers tightened around it. And what does this open, Vanessa? Another lie? Her expression faltered for the first time. Just a flicker. But I saw it. You found it, she murmured. Then it's already too late. Malcolm stepped forward. What's that supposed to mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, typing quickly before looking back up. You two should leave. Now. The people Simmons worked for? They know everything. And once they find out what you've opened, they won't just come after me. My pulse pounded in my ears. What's in the safe, Vanessa? She looked at me, really looked at me. Proof, enough to destroy all of them, but you can't keep it hidden forever. Malcolm shook his head, desperate. We can go to the police? No, she said sharply. You go to the police, You'll end up just like your father. Silence. Then softly, she said, "There's more you don't know, Margaret. Henry didn't die alone that night. Someone else was there with him." "Who?" She turned toward the door. "Ask your son." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Before I could react, Vanessa walked out into the rain, leaving the door wide open behind her. After Vanessa left, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Rain rattled the roof, thunder grumbled far off, and the air between me and Malcolm was thick enough to choke on. He stood by the doorway, the folder still clutched to his chest, eyes fixed on the empty space where she'd been. I waited. Sometimes silence is the only truth left. Finally, he whispered, "She's lying, right?" I didn't answer. "Tell me she's lying, Mama." But I couldn't, because part of me already knew she wasn't. He sank into a chair, his voice raw. "She said Dad didn't die alone. That night." He stopped, pressing his hands against his face. "Malcolm," I said softly, "look at me." He lifted his head, tears streaking down his cheeks. "I was there." The room spun. "What do you mean? You were there?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't see it happen, not all of it. But Dad called me that night, said he needed help moving some boxes from the plant. I was supposed to meet him there after choir rehearsal. When I got there, the alarms were blaring. The floor was covered in smoke and sparks. I saw him." His voice broke. "I saw him fall." I gripped the back of the chair to stay upright. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Simmons told me if I said a word, they'd blame me. The police found my fingerprints on the scaffolding. They said I'd tampered with safety locks." He looked up at me, eyes wide with the memory. "I was 17, Mama." I didn't even understand what was happening. Simmons said he'd make it go away if I signed what he gave me. That's how my name got tied to the money. He said it was the settlement transfer. My heart ached. My son had been trapped since the night his father died. I knelt beside him, cupping his face. "You were a child. They used you." He nodded miserably. I tried to forget. But every time Vanessa mentioned Dad, something inside me twisted. She knew, Mama. She always knew thunder cracked above us, shaking the windows. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked slow and heavy, each second marking the space between guilt and forgiveness. Then Malcolm whispered, "What's in the safe, Mama? What if it proves everything?" I reached into my coat and pulled out the silver key. Then we find it before they do. We left the house before midnight. The city lights shimmered off puddles, street lamps flickering like broken promises. Malcolm drove. I kept the key tight in my hand, afraid it might vanish. When we reached the Citizens Bank in Decatur, the lot was empty. A 24-hour access sign glowed faintly above the glass doors. We slipped inside. My stomach knotted so tight I could barely breathe. The lock turned easily. Box 202 slid out with a metallic groan. Inside were 3 things: a flash drive, a stack of photographs, and a folded letter addressed simply to my family. Malcolm unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. Henry's handwriting was bold, rushed. "If you're seeing this, they finally got me. Simmons and his partners at the company are laundering money through falsified safety grants. I kept copies, proof that would destroy them. But I can't trust anyone, not even the people closest to me. They're watching. Protect our son." The paper trembled in his hands. He knew, Mama. He knew everything. I opened the flash drive on my laptop. Hundreds of files filled the screen. Financial records, photos of checks, names of politicians, contractors, even church donors. All connected, all dirty. "This is why they killed him," I whispered. He was about to expose them. Malcolm stared at the files like they were ghosts. And now they'll come for us. Outside, headlights swept across the windows, slow, deliberate. They already have, I said. We ducked low behind the counter. A black SUV idled at the curb. Two figures stepped out, both in dark coats. One of them carried an umbrella, the other a phone pressed to his ear. Even through the glass, I recognized the shape of his shoulders. Attorney Simmons. Malcolm's breath quickened. He found us. Stay down, I whispered. We wait. But Simmons didn't come inside. Instead, he opened the SUV's trunk and pulled out a jerry can. My stomach turned. He's going to burn it, Malcolm whispered. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. I grabbed the flash drive, shoved it into my purse, and whispered, "Go out the back." "Mama! Now!" We ran through the emergency exit, sprinting toward the alley as thunder rolled overhead. Behind us, I heard glass shatter. Then the sharp hiss of liquid hitting tile. We kept running until the bank lights blurred behind the rain. We stopped under the awning of an abandoned laundromat, gasping for air. Water dripped from Malcolm's hair. My hands shook as I pulled out the flash drive. "This," I said between breaths. "This is our proof. It ends here." He nodded slowly, eyes burning with something new. "Then let's make it end." For the first time in years, I saw Henry in his face. Not the guilt, not the weakness, but the strength. "Tomorrow," I said, "we take this to the press. Let the world see what they did." Malcolm hesitated. "What if they find us first?" I squeezed his hand. "Then they'll finally learn what happens when a mother stops running." Lightning flashed, turning the street white for an instant. In that light, I saw it. Another car parked across the road, engine idling, someone watching from inside. I turned back to Malcolm, voice low. "We move at dawn." By dawn, the storm had passed, but the streets still steamed, the air thick with that strange quiet that always follows destruction. News spread fast. A small fire at the Citizens Bank in Decatur, contained before sunrise. The police called it an electrical issue. I knew better. The flash drive was tucked inside my coat, safe but heavy, as if it carried the weight of Henry's ghost. Malcolm drove in silence beside me, his jaw tight, eyes red from a night without sleep. Neither of us spoke until the skyline gave way to the abandoned warehouses near Fulton Steel and Supply. That's where Henry died. That's where this had to end. The factory gates hung open, rusted and bent. Vines curled through the fencing, and the old "Safety First" sign dangled by one corner. Inside, puddles reflected the weak morning sun, turning the broken windows into shards of light. Malcolm parked beside the loading dock. "You sure about this, Mama?" "No," I said, "but we're out of places to hide." We stepped inside. The smell of oil and rain-soaked dust hit first, then something else. Smoke, faint and lingering, like memory itself. A voice echoed from above. "I was wondering when you'd come home, Margaret." Simmons. He stood on the catwalk, gray suit immaculate, not a drop of sweat or dirt on him. He looked exactly as he had at my funeral. Calm, polished, confident, the devil in Sunday shoes. "Still wearing that smug grin after all these years?" I said. "You burned the bank." "Didn't get what you wanted?" He smiled thinly. "On the contrary." "I wanted you to bring it here." Malcolm stepped forward, fists clenched. "You killed my father." Simmons' gaze slid to him. "Killed?" "Number. Your father killed himself the moment he tried to play hero." I felt my chest tighten. "Don't you dare!" "Oh, he was a good man," Simmons interrupted, voice silk and poison. "But he wasn't innocent." He built the same scam I perfected. The difference is, he grew a conscience. He started down the stairs slowly. Henry came to me that night, said he had the files, said he'd turn himself in. You know what I told him? Do what you must. He walked back onto that floor alone. You're lying. I'm not. His eyes glinted. But you'll never believe me unless you see it for yourself. He nodded toward the far end of the factory. A single metal cabinet stood against the wall, padlocked and scorched from some long-ago fire. That's where he left the last recording, Simmons said, before the scaffolding fell. Malcolm moved first. He broke the lock with a crowbar lying nearby and pulled the drawer open. Inside was a small cassette labeled February 12th, 1998. Hands shaking, he slid it into the portable player on the shelf. Static, then Henry's voice, familiar and trembling. James, I can't do this anymore. The money isn't worth it. They'll come after Margaret and the boy. If you're hearing this, I'm turning the evidence over tomorrow. God forgive us both. Then another voice, Simmons's, cold and close to the mic. You always were a fool for love. A crash, a scream, metal collapsing, then silence. Malcolm hit stop. I stared at Simmons. You recorded it. He shrugged. Proof of loyalty for my partners. Henry was supposed to survive long enough to retract that statement. But accidents happen. Malcolm lunged at him. I grabbed his arm. No. He wants that Simmons smiled. Listen to your mother. She's smarter than you think. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. You built your fortune off our pain? You forged, you lied, you killed, and you still stand here thinking you've won? He straightened his cuffs. Winning is simply surviving long enough to tell your version of the story. I pulled the flash drive from my coat. Then maybe it's time someone else tells it. His expression changed. First surprise, then fear. That drive doesn't matter. No one will believe you. Oh, they will, I said, because I sent copies last night. Every file, every transaction, every name, to every local news desk in Atlanta. If I die today, the world still hears the truth. For the first time, his composure cracked. You, what? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You buried my husband. Tried to bury me, but you forgot who raised me. I grew up under women who prayed through war and loss and still stood taller than their graves. You don't scare me, James behind me. Malcolm's phone buzzed. A flood of notifications lit up the screen. Breaking news alerts, emails, calls. Channel 5, Channel 8, the Atlanta Ledger. Simmons's empire was burning in real time. He turned away, muttering to himself, then looked back at me with a strange, weary smile. You think this ends it? There's always another one of me. Maybe, I said, but not today. He walked past us toward the exit, the weight of defeat dragging at his steps. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Malcolm exhaled shakily. It's over? I looked around the ruined factory, the rust, the echoes, the ghosts of everything we'd lost. Almost. We stood in silence as the sirens grew louder, lights flashing through the cracks in the wall. For the first time since Henry's death, I felt the air shift, lighter, real. Malcolm turned to me, tears mixing with the soot on his face. I'm sorry, Mama. For all of it, I placed my hand on his cheek. You were a boy caught in a grown man's war. But you came back. That's what matters. He nodded, and for a moment, we just stood there, two survivors inside the skeleton of everything that tried to destroy us. If you're still watching, tell me this. When justice finally comes, does it ever feel... A phone buzzed. Pastor's, not mine. He read the screen, then looked at me with soft, careful eyes. Channel 8 says the DA is filing charges today. Fraud, conspiracy, obstruction. They're naming partners. It won't fix the years, Margaret, but it's a start. Justice can sound like a verdict you're not sure you want. I nodded anyway. Malcolm stood and walked to the piano. He pressed a single key. It rang clear and true. No dust in it, no lies. I thought the truth would feel like victory. He whispered, "Why does it feel like a funeral?" "Because something did die," I said. "The story they told us about who we were." I touched his shoulder. "But that makes room for the story we'll write next." Footsteps shuffled behind us. Deacon Harris stepped into the aisle, his arm in a sling, color back in his cheeks. He looked 10 years older than he did last Sunday. "I came to say I was wrong," he said. "I thought silence was protection." "It was a cage." He set a small velvet pouch on the piano. "Found this in the safe in my office. Been keeping it for a day when I'd finally be brave." Inside was a brass church key with a single engraved word, "Promise." "What does it open?" Malcolm asked. "Not the church," Harris said. "Henry's locker in the basement. He kept tools there for the choir risers. Said one day, if anything ever happened to him, the right hands would know." We followed the deacon down the narrow stairs into the cool hush where the church keeps its Christmas pageants and last year's bulletins. Dust floated in the light like slow prayers. Locker 14 waited in the corner, dented and stubborn. The brass key turned with a soft, certain click. Inside, a shoebox wrapped with twine, a folded navy sweater that still smelled like my husband's cologne, and a cassette labeled in Henry's confident hand, "For Maggie." My knees gave out before my heart did. I sat right there on the concrete while Malcolm found an old cassette player in the youth room supplies and pressed play. Static. Then his voice. Steady, warm, the sound that used to greet me at the door after long shifts, filled the room. "Maggie, if this reaches you, I didn't keep my promise the way I meant to. I thought I could fix what I broke without you carrying it. That was pride pretending to be love. I'm leaving proof with people who still have spines. If it costs me, know it was the only honest coin I had left." He paused, and I heard him exhale the way he did when the world was heavier than his shoulders. "Tell our boy I was weak, and then, for a minute, I was brave. Tell him the brave part is the one I want him to keep." Something rustled on the tape, paper sliding, maybe a chair. Then the voice I knew best became the one I'd waited years to hear again. "Maggie, your name lives in my mouth like prayer. If there's a day when you can't forgive me, forgive yourself for it. But if there's a day when you can, play his eye is on the sparrow like we did when we had nothing but each other. That's where I'll meet you." The tape clicked, ended. No courtroom can deliver that kind of justice. Only mercy can. I pressed the sweater to my face and let the smell undo me. Malcolm didn't speak. He put his head on my shoulder and stayed until the concrete didn't feel so cold. By afternoon, the city had opinions. Phones rang, headlines multiplied. Old friends called to say they always knew something was off, and strangers wrote that I was brave like I'd ordered courage from a catalog. Vanessa turned herself in, her lawyer angling for cooperation in exchange for truth. The DA wanted her timeline. She wanted immunity. Somewhere in there is the math only prosecutors understand. Somewhere in there is a woman who loved a man she married to ruin. That evening, the church filled without being asked. Women in hats and men in suits they only wear for weddings, and trouble slid into pews and hummed what they didn't have words for. I sat at the piano because Henry asked me to. Fingers stiff, heart not ready, but a promise is a door you open even when it sticks. The first chord wobbled. The second found its footing. By the third, the room was singing with me, low at first, then full the way water fills a vessel made for it. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at the hymn book where Henry had tucked notes for beginners. Over the alto line, in pencil, he'd written, "Start soft. Stand tall." When we finished, Malcolm stood. "If you're here because you love our family, thank you," he said. "If you're here because you love the truth, love it enough to let it cost you, stay." He glanced at me. "We're not hiding anymore." A hand went up in the third row. Miss Darlene from the county records. Some of us watched this on the news and forgot there are people inside the story. Her voice trembled. "We see you now." Maybe that's all a woman like me ever wanted. Not a parade, not revenge carved on stone, just to be seen and for the story to stop lying about itself. When the crowd thinned and the church returned to its creaks and whispers, I sat with Malcolm on the front steps. Atlanta breathed around us, sirens far away, cicadas waking in the trees, a boy on a scooter dragging joy behind him like a comet. "What now?" he asked. "Now we live," I said. "The house might be gone." "The money too, but we've got a kitchen table somewhere with our name on it, and I've got recipes older than your mistakes. We'll start there." He laughed, small but honest. "You think folks will ever stop talking?" "Not a chance," I said. "But when they talk, let's give them something true to pass along." He nodded. We sat a while longer, because sometimes endings need quiet to land. If you've walked with me this far, through the lies, the letters, the keys, the fire, tell me where you're watching from and what part of this story you'll carry forward. I read those words at night like candles, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Not for me, but so you don't miss what healing looks like when it shows up in its work clothes and asks you to roll up your sleeves. Before we left, I went back to the piano one last time, slipped the promise key onto a ribbon and tied it to the inside hinge, where only someone searching for hope would find it. The next woman who needs it will know what it opens. Outside, the sky finally cleared. The city smelled like rain and second chances. "My son chose his wife over me," I whispered. But what happened after shocked me into remembering who I am. I took Malcolm's hand. "Let's go home, even if we have to build it from a folding table in faith." We walked to the car. I didn't look back. Some ghosts follow whether you turn around or not, but some, when the truth is spoken out loud and sung over them, learn their place and stay. And if Henry was right, and he often was, then every time a sparrow lands on our windowsill, it won't just be a bird. It'll be a man I loved saying, "Start soft, stand tall."